You know, I'm missing something, and I think I know what it is.
Hey, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from the Vintage Vibe. And feeling kind of festive, we're going to review Santa's Sleigh with Technics SA-800. And if you're feeling chill, it's time to move on.
The SA-800 is one behemoth of a receiver. I mean, this is only one model down below the infamous SA-1000.
And deep from the depths of the Vintage Vibe vault, here is my Technics SA-1000. And, well, in comparison, the SA-800, which is quite similar in appearance and in size.
Now, I must confess, I sold that SA-1000 about 5 years ago, and I've probably kicked myself in the pants since. I mean, the thing's probably quadrupled in price. So the SA-800, this guy here, is probably the closest that I'm going to get again to having one. So let's take a peek at this unit, talk a little bit about what makes it so special as a receiver. We're going to compare it also to the SA-1000. We're going to jog the memory a little bit, and I'll give you kind of an in-depth peek at this unit. We'll talk a little bit about how it sounds, some of the features, and then obviously we'll rate it and determine whether or not it deserves a place in your vintage audio collection.
And here's where the magic happens. You've got 125 watts per channel of vintage muscle. Technics built a pretty serious piece of machinery here. And you can see a fairly large power transformer mounted here with two good sized main filter capacitors, the heat sinks for left and right channel with the transistors mounted right on them. And here though is where where the fun happens. Somewhere deep down inside there are the trim pots hidden. God forbid you get noisy controls, because you're in for one fun Friday night.
So I'm sitting in my office in my serious chair, because this is probably the most serious thing about the amplifier, is just for some obscure reason. I mean, Rudolph only knows why. They hid the potometers and the controls, the pots and all that, somewhere deep in the belly of the beast. God forbid you got to get in there to clean anything. I mean, I was lucky. It came to me noise-free, all the controls, so I didn't have to touch it. The only thing I did have to do was adjust the bias. I found it was running a little bit hot. Put your hand on the top of the receiver and it felt a little warm to me. You should be able to, with the top off, put your hand on those heat sinks and just be warmed at the touch. Or if you were to put a thermometer on top of them, probably between 30, maybe at most 35 degrees Celsius. Anything warmer than that, something's out of whack. It's running a little bit hot. Forgot what else I was going to say, but I'm sure it's probably important. So something neat about this amplifier that I'd like to share with you is when you first turn it on, it actually sends a signal to the left and right speaker simultaneously, and it determines the actual impedance of those speakers and adjusts whatever it magically does at the transformer to actually run those speakers, whether it's an 8 ohm or a 6 ohm or even a 4 ohm speaker. Now that, in my opinion, is pretty cool, and that was the important thing I knew I would remember. If you're ready, let's go take it for a little spin and check out some of the features.
So you have main and remote speakers, bass, mid-range, and treble control. You've got a power display switch to turn on and off the LEDs, as well as a range switch to control their sensitivity. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And beside that, you have an acoustic control command center, let's call it. And this really gives a lot of unique added flexibility in the controls. So you can bypass the tone controls altogether by turning acoustic control on or off. And then you can either use the traditional loudness bump for late night listening sessions, or you can go ahead and boost just the low frequencies, or boost just the high frequencies, or heck, boost them both if you like. There is some fantastic control. And talking about controls, you've got some more stereo and mono control, FM muting, your tape monitor switches, and your input selector switches, and oh, that volume knob. Just saying, volume comes in handy. You also have a multiplex switch and a high blend switch in case your FM broadcast is noisy.
So far, I mean, it's pretty well equipped. I mean, and it's a big receiver. So if you're into monster receivers, this is one of them. Now, I have to admit, the SA-1000 is even bigger in all respects. I mean, it was the world's most powerful receiver, 330 watts per channel. I want to show you, just for a moment, what it looks like inside.
And here's the inside of the 1000. Yes, I had a odd blue capacitor staring at you. There's twice of everything in here, twice the heat sinks, twice, maybe threefold the capacitance, maybe four. The transformer, like a brick. I mean, 90 pounds almost. Here's the inside of the 800. Very similar in a lot of respects, right down to the heatsink design. Nonetheless, an impressive receiver. I'd rank it with a 1080, a Pioneer, and a tuner section that is quite well designed. Now this is what just makes me giggle. I mean, look, check it out. 700 watts on the meters. Here's the SA-800 back down to reality. I mean, it still says 200, and that's pretty cool. Here's little LEDs bouncing around, and you can make them more sensitive with that range switch, as we mentioned. And let's just go back again. 700? I mean, just more is better, I guess. But in all seriousness, it's 125 watts per channel, and that's more than enough power.
Is it? So, how does it sound? It is an unbelievably punchy amplifier. It's got a lot of guts. It's pretty accurate sounding. I mean, it's not kind of overly romantic or all woolly in the bass. I mean, it's pretty accurate, but it's got a lot of punch. And that's one thing I remember about the SA-1000 as well. It was a punchy sounding amplifier. The good news is the two amplifiers sound quite similar. So apart from a difference in power and really the prestige of having the world's most powerful amplifier, the SA-800 is therefore quite a good deal. So what will one of these things cost Santa? Well, in Canadian dollars in 2020, probably anywhere between about $600 to $800 is reasonable. I have seen some examples starting to creep up north of $1,000, but realistically, that's probably a little bit high for the receiver. And all things considering, knowing now a Pioneer, let's say an SX1050 is going for more than one of these things, the SA-800 is a pretty good deal.
So dollars for donuts, it's a pretty good deal. Big receiver looks, big power without breaking the bank.
So with low THD rates, or total harmonic distortion, of about 0.04, 125 watts per channel, a discrete phono stage, the SA-800 is starting to look like a bargain when it comes to vintage audio. So is the yay or an A? I think you could already probably guess. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. It's certainly something that should have a place in your vintage audio collection if you're into monster receivers. Thanks for joining us on the Vintage Vibe. Join us next time as we do another review and dive a little deeper into the vintage vaults. Thanks.
Don't forget to leave your comments below and like and subscribe.